My name is Matt Laidlaw. I'm really, really honored and grateful for the chance to be joining you all this morning. I wish I could share how strange it is that I'm here. Um, that would be a conversation for another time, but I will say this before I forget. I've been following the story of this community for many years, and the courage and the authenticity that you all have demonstrated in your journey, which I know has not been easy, is remarkable. And I think the world needs C3 and more places like C3. So I hope you keep going. I hope you courageously keep going. And a year ago, when my friend Kent called me and told me that he had accepted a role here, I was delighted. It is so awesome that these two stories have converged. Kent called me on, I don't remember when it was. It was like 4 or 5 days ago. I don't remember what day it was. And I was driving, and he let me know the news about his friend passing away. Somebody that I had only met a handful of times, but somebody that I knew had impacted Kent and his story deeply, and that he would be participating in the funeral service this Saturday. So I, of course, said, yes, I'll do whatever to come and help. But I was in a family caravan to camp when he called. And when I literally mean a caravan, because when you have a 5-year-old and a 7-year-old, you take both of your cars and everything you own with you. We stopped and bought more things on the way to camp. And I said, yeah, I can fill in, but I don't have any nice clothes. And he said, that's fine, it's fine. And I said, can't, right? Fine, right? And then I said, and the clothes I do have will smell by Sunday. A strange mixture of natural deodorant and Lake Michigan and campfire. And he said, fine, it's no problem. So if you walked in this morning and you thought you could smell like the campfire from the state park, because the way the wind was blowing, that's my family. That's the smell of my family. So thank you for welcoming us this morning, for the opportunity to be here with you all. Really, really grateful for that. I've spent most of my professional life working with high school and college age students in religious and educational contexts. And really over the past 18 months or so, I've spent a lot of intentional time reflecting on what I've learned. What have I learned about human beings, about this age group, this demographic of people, what it means to sort through some of the bigger questions of life? What have I learned during this time when I've had the unbelievable opportunity to work with this age group? And if you work with young people, you know that you don't just work with high school or college age students, because if you're working with them, you're also working with their families as well, right? Because they're part of a family system. So during the time when I've been able to work with young people, I've been around births and funerals and weddings and baptisms and illness and job loss and disease and just sort of all of the best and all of the worst of life with young people and also their families. And one of the things that has risen to the surface for me as I've thought about what have I learned about what it means to be a human being from working with this age group also coincides with what I've been wrestling with in the same amount of time, the past 18 months, where it sort of feels like the world we live in has sort of shifted on its axis. Like the world we live in is sort of the same world, but it's also a different world. And also I feel like I'm seeing the world differently in religious conversations and political conversations and any sort of cross-cultural conversation. It just feels like a different world in the past 18 months. So I've been trying to sort through that, and I've been trying to more intentionally look at what have I learned from working with young people. And a couple of things have really risen to the surface. One is that I'm really fascinated by how and why people actually change. Why would somebody make a life-altering decision or change their mind about something? If they believed a certain thing and were heading in this direction, what would cause them to sort of make a 180 or consider another perspective? And as I've reflected on this, I've really been amazed that a pattern in my story of working with young people is just how flexible and adaptable young people are when it comes to making changes in their life. If they catch a vision, if they get excited about something, if they see an injustice, more times than not, they're willing to just change. Maybe you have kids or grandkids, and all of a sudden they're like wearing completely different clothes, listening to completely different music, spending their money completely differently. And it's not just because their friends or have changed. It's because they've caught some sort of vision. And that has been striking to me as I've reflected. Like, young people are incredibly adaptable and flexible when it comes to changing their mind. And as I've reflected, I've also been surprised as I've remembered stories of older people. And I don't mean, and I don't want to be accused of being an ageist or whatever, but like people who are older than high school or college age students. So, I'm in my mid-30s. So me, my parents, my grandparents, my great-grandparents, older people, I've been able to remember stories of like, wow, that person, those parents, that couple did a complete 180. Like, why and how did they experience that sort of change and transformation? I've also been able to think of a lot of stories where older people, non-high school or college age students, were presented with a good amount of evidence, really sound logic, good arguments, even a good amount of peer pressure or communal pressure to change their life or change their mind about something, and they just dug in their heels. Unbelievably surprised by the flexibility and adaptability of young people. Unbelievably surprised by how many instances I can think of older people making changes or changing their mind. And also unbelievably surprised at how unwilling many of us are to change our lives or change our minds. Now, we can all think of people like that, right? Like, we're all imagining faces right now, but before we judge all of them, like, how many of us ate ice cream last night after 7 p.m., right? Some, right? You know it's not good for you. There is evidence. There is proof. You know it's unhealthy, but Moose Tracks is so good, right? So yeah, we can like make it about like, well, the evidence, global warming, whatever. It's like, well, let's also talk about ice cream, right? Like, we all are unwilling to change our minds about things or change our habits or patterns of our lives in some way. So as I've reflected on this, I've also, in my spare time and in whatever way I've been able to professionally, just been trying to dig in. Like, why do people change? And how do people change? And that's a little bit what I want to talk about this morning. And I'll offer two caveats before we push further into this. One is there's a ton of data on this right now. Like, there's a lot of research being done on how and why do people change or change their minds. I have read like less than 1% of 1% of that. So I am not an expert, right? I am on the journey on this topic with all of you. I am somebody who wants to change. I am somebody who knows I need to keep changing and change my mind. I'm not an expert on this topic. So that's the first caveat. The second is that when you have conversations like this, whether it's in like a spiritual community or like a TED Talk or something like that, you tend to think, oh, the person who's talking is like one step further than me on this topic or on this journey. And if you ask my wife, Stephanie, she will tell you, I'm not, okay? I am absolutely not one step further on this journey. I am somebody who needs to change and keep changing and grow and experience transformation. I'm only sharing out of my story, not out of a place of sort of arrival or expertise. Fair? Okay. So most of my experience with younger people and professionally has been in religious and educational contexts, and primarily in Christian contexts. And when it comes to the topic of change or transformation, there's a couple ways that I've learned and that I've been taught on how these things tend to work themselves out. So the first is sort of the route of behavior modification. So here's where I am. I have some sort of ideal of who I want to be or what my life should be like. And maybe there's some sort of religious standard that I'm supposed to be living up to. Maybe God's even a little bit mad at me that I'm like this and I'm not like that. So I'm just going to work real hard to try and modify all of my external behaviors. This is the path of just, I want to be a little more good. If I can be a little more good tomorrow than I am good today, then I'm on the path to change and transformation. That's the behavior modification model. The second is similar, but it's sort of upside down. It has a sort of a flipped tone to it. This is what the philosopher and theologian Dallas Willard calls the gospel of sin management. Is anybody familiar with that term or heard this term before? It's this idea, and he's a Christian philosopher, it's this idea that religious proclamation, or he would say that many Christians believe that the reason Jesus came and taught and lived and died was to try and just get us to sin a little bit less. Like that's like what we've done with religious proclamation in the message of Jesus, is boiled it down to principles, ideas, commandments, rules, teachings, because you're pretty bad the way you are. And if you could be just a little less bad, that's like the whole point. That's why we meet, that's why we gather, that's why we have these systems and structures in place, that's why we need you to give money. That's how this whole thing works. So behavior modification, just try and be a little more good. Gospel of sin management, if you could just be a little less bad, that's how change and transformation works. That's how many religious systems tend to operate. The third one that I'm familiar with is what the late Trappist monk Thomas Merton referred to as our own little personal salvation projects. This is sort of this like really inward, self-focused, personal growth path. This is like the person who's like, yeah, I don't even really know the names of my children, but I meditate twice a day, right? Yeah, I can't really handle the news. I don't watch the news. I don't know that my neighbor just lost their job, but I've been doing a lot of yoga lately, right? Not that there's anything wrong with meditation or yoga or contemplative prayer or whatever, but this is like, I am in my own little bubble, and if I can just get my soul and my stuff right, then God or the divine or whatever language you want to use for that, if I can get myself right, then I can be right with that, and then my life will be okay, and then maybe I can begin to think outside of myself. The problem with that model, obviously, is that we just never get traction in that. Like you just get stuck in that place forever, and the wheels just keep spinning and spinning and spinning. So those three models tend to be what I've experienced when we talk about change and transformation with people, how it works itself out, primarily in the Christian context that I've been a part of. Change your behavior so you can be a little more good. If you could just learn to manage your sins a little better, then you won't be as bad. Maybe God will love you a little bit more. Or, hey, use these tools, use these practices, just focus on yourself, get your own little personal salvation project worked out, and then you can be one of us or think outside of yourself or make a difference in the world. I don't want to make any assumptions about your story or where you're from or where you're at, but in my story, those three models have been very ineffective for me. And I've noticed them to be quite ineffective in the lives of other people. And I think those messages can be incredibly harmful and hurtful to young people when we teach them and proclaim them to them. And chart that is the course. Be a little more good. Stop being as bad. Just get your own soul worked out, and then maybe you can contribute something positive to the world. So in this past season, I've been trying to find a better way. And as I continue to work with young people, is there a better way? Is there a better way to think about change and transformation? What are the other options, tools, practices, theories, philosophies that are out there that might be healthier for our young people and also might actually be effective? Because it's not just our experience that's telling us these things don't work. All of the data and research that's being done across the religious spectrum is showing us those models don't actually work. They're not actually effective. And there's nothing wrong with being happy that, like, hey, maybe I had one less drink, or maybe I didn't have ice cream every week last night, or maybe I'm a slightly more loving spouse or partner or parent this week. That's fine. That's behavior modification. That's good. Some behavior modification is good. But it's not ultimately transformative. It doesn't actually bring about long-term change. So on this journey that I've been on to try and sort this out in this past season, I ran across a quote that has given words to my own personal experience and also haunted me in some pretty terrible and beautiful ways. The priest, Richard Rohr, in thinking about transformation and change, he says that the two primary and universal paths to change and transformation have been available to all people at all times and in all places, regardless of culture and religion. They've always been available to all people. And those two primary paths to change and transformation are great love and great suffering. And if you live long enough, and you stay on the path of love long enough, and you stay on the path of suffering long enough, those two things eventually become the same thing. And if you're married, you know this is true, right? I'm so glad you laughed at that joke, because I won't be the only one in trouble on the car ride home today. Great love, great suffering, the universal and primary paths to transformation, and eventually, if you live long enough and go down those paths long enough, they become the same thing. If you think about your own life, if you can think of a time that you've actually changed your mind about something, changed your perspective, changed your relationships, I would bet that many of those instances were tied to an experience of great love, beauty, truth, wonder, or great suffering, a terrible thing that was done to you or that you did to somebody else. In my own life, 5 years ago, my daughter was born, my daughter Evelyn. And this was like a moment of pure love and beauty and joy. I remember holding her. And I also remember holding her. And for the first 10 hours of her life, being in a waiting room where doctors and nurses kept coming in and out of, telling me if my wife was going to make it through the emergency surgery that she was going through. Great love and beauty, and great suffering and pain, all in one moment. And I can point to that experience and say, I have never been the same. We have never been the same. And that is a totally different spiritual economy than behavior modification and sin management and our own little personal salvation projects. But here's the thing. With that, great love and great suffering are the things we tend to avoid the most in our life. We tend to hold them here. Whether we've gone through love or gone through suffering, we tend to hold them at a distance because it is hard to control. It is unpredictable. We would never choose suffering in our own life. And love, like real love, is wild. It can't be contained or measured. It's no wonder we don't want to teach these things to young people, right? Because we're already like terrified of them and their energy. To let them loose towards real, pure love and suffering would be even more horrifying for us adults to think about. So for me, when I think about my own greatest love and my own greatest suffering and the vulnerability that requires and the courage it takes to face those things, I think of one thing. And it's probably the same thing that you think about. It's the book, We're Going on a Bear Hunt, by Michael Rosen and Helen Oxenberry. Are you familiar with this book? A few of us? Okay. I would like us to read this morning. And I mean us, not just me. So here's what we're going to do. And I may never be back here to C3 again, and that may become more evident to all of you as this little talk goes on, and that's fine with me. So I'm not going to try and be manipulative or conjure up false enthusiasm here, but let's think about this in terms of hey, maybe the kids should be wishing they were in here when they hear our volume with this, okay? Maybe the first time they're thinking it sounds like they're having more fun upstairs. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to read, and when I'm sitting down, I'm reading. When I stand up, I would like you to repeat after me. Does that sound good? Can we try that? Okay. I am so excited to see what happens. All right. We are going on a bear hunt. We're going on a bear hunt. We're going to catch a big one. What a beautiful day. We're not scared. Uh-oh, grass. Uh-oh, grass. Long, wavy grass. Long, wavy grass. Can't go over it. Can't go under it. Oh, no. We've got to go through it. Swishy swashy. Swishy swashy. Swishy swashy. Take a breath. It's fine. Okay. We're going on a bear hunt. We're going to catch a big one. What a beautiful day. We're not scared. Oh, a river. A deep, cold river. We can't go over it. Can't go under it. Oh no. We've got to go through it. Splash, splosh. Splash, splosh. Splash, splosh. We're going on a bear hunt. We're going to catch a big one. What a beautiful day. We're not scared. Uh-oh, mud. Thick, oozy mud. We can't go over it. We can't go under it. Oh, no. We've got to go through it. This is my favorite one. Squelch, squirch. Squelch, squirch. Squelch, squirch. Don't worry, we're about 10% through. Okay. We're going on a bear hunt. We're going to catch a big one. What a beautiful day. We're not scared. Uh-oh, a forest. A big dark forest. We can't go over it. We can't go under it. Oh no. We've got to go through it. Stumble, trip. Stumble, trip. Stumble, trip. We're going on a bear hunt. We're going to catch a big one. What a beautiful day. We're not scared. Uh-oh, a snowstorm. A swirling, whirling snowstorm. We can't go over it. We can't go under it. Oh no, we've got to go through it. Whoo-woo. 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 I forgot that one's my favorite one. We're going on a bear hunt. We're going to catch a big one. What a beautiful day. We're not scared. Uh-oh, a cave. A narrow, gloomy cave. We can't go over it. We can't go under it. Oh no, we've got to go through it. Tiptoe, tiptoe, tiptoe. What's that? One shiny wet nose. Two big furry ears. Two big googly eyes. It's a bear. Quick, back through the cave. Tiptoe, tiptoe, tiptoe. Back through the snowstorm. Whoo, woo, whoo, woo, whoo, woo. Back through the forest. Stumble, trip, stumble, trip, stumble, trip. Back through the mud. Squelch, squirch, squelch, squirch, squelch, squirch. Back through the river. Splash, 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 splash. Back through the grass. Swishy, swashy, swishy, swashy, swishy, swashy. Whew. Get to our front door. Open the door. Up the stairs. Oh no. We forgot to shut the door back downstairs. Shut the door. Back upstairs. Into the bedroom. Into bed. Under the covers. We're not going on a bear hunt again. And the bear's sad, walking away. Yeah. Okay, I think you should give yourself some applause for participating in that madness. This is a story, a children's story, about a family going on a bear hunt. But I also think it's a story about you and me and our own path to transformation. Because when it comes to my own great love, and when it comes to my own great suffering, every single time I want to say, I want to go over it, I want to go under it, I want to go around it, I don't want to have to go through it. And I think the wisdom of this book and of the spiritual life says there's no shortcuts when it comes to our own change and transformation. In the vulnerability, in the courage, in the honesty it takes to say, can't go over it, can't go under it, can't go around it, I have to go through it, is often more than we can sometimes bear. There's a story in the Gospel of Mark, chapter 14, near the end of the life of Jesus. Jesus is in the Garden of Gethsemane. He's been abandoned by his friends. They're all taking a nap. Judas has betrayed him. And Jesus is praying. And the story says he falls to the ground. I think it's the Gospel of John says that he's sweating what's like drops of blood. And he says to God, "Isn't there another way? Can you take this cup from me?" For Jesus, who I think is an archetype for this great love and great suffering, he shows us his great love for people and for the world has brought him to this moment, and it is now going to lead to his great suffering. He knows he's about to be arrested and tortured. His love and suffering are becoming the same thing. And he's saying, can't we go over this? Can't we go under this? Can't we go around this? And the story offers no response. God does not answer this prayer. There's silence. And I think in this framework, the silence is saying, no, we're going to have to go through it. But on the other side of this love and suffering, Jesus is your transformation. And on the other side of our great love and great suffering is our transformation. So I don't know where you're all at in this room this morning. If you're like me, it's Sunday, it's a holiday weekend, but my mind's starting to think about Tuesday, real life. Maybe you're here and you're saying, oh no, anxiety. Oh no, cancer. Oh no, my child. Oh no, this marriage. Oh no, the office at 8:30 on Tuesday morning. Oh no, this community. Oh no, my parents. Oh no, my class. Oh no, a river. Oh no, mud. Oh no, a snowstorm. Whatever it is, I want to encourage you this morning to have the courage and the awareness that you can't go over it, you can't go under it, you can't go around it. You have to go through it. And wisdom promises that on the other side of that is transformation and change and growth. My hope and prayer for each of you and for this community is that you continue to courageously step towards your great love and your great suffering. And that on the other side of that, you will continue to experience change and transformation. Thank you.